There, I did.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hello. Welcome to the Etiquette and Social Graciousness webinar. My name is Lisa Rubini LaForest, and I will be your technical producer and moderator this evening. This webinar will be presented by Jen Larson as our guest speaker. Our goal is to increase our knowledge of etiquette and social graciousness. Before we start the presentation, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. On the right side of your screen, you will see the attendee control panel, and on the left is the webinar viewer window. This viewer window will display the presenter's screen when the webinar begins. The control panel can be minimized or expanded by clicking on the horizontal double arrow in the upper left corner. Minimizing the panel allows a better view of the presentation. Take a moment to practice. There are a few features of the control panel that the attendee should know. First, be familiar with the Raise Your Hand button. This button is located along the left side of the control panel. It allows you to virtually raise your hand if you have a question or if you want to respond to a question being asked by a presenter. Click this button to raise your hand now. Clicking again will lower the hand. Another important feature of the control panel is the questions pane. To submit a question, type it into the question box. These may be questions related to the presentation or technical questions related to the GoToWebinar system. You may also be asked by the presenter to type your ideas or responses here as part of an exercise during the webinar. You may send a quick note in the questions pane now if you like. Questions may be submitted at any time. These will be monitored and we will try to respond quickly if we see something that shouldn't wait until the Q&A period, such as making a clarification. During the webinar, you may be asked to respond to a polling question or survey. Please take the time to participate as your input and ideas are valuable to the group. Be sure to stay attentive and to interact as much as possible during this webinar. The quality of your experience depends on your attention and participation. Try to avoid the distractions of responding to email, checking Facebook, instant messaging, or working on other tasks on your computer. If you need to step away for a moment, do not close the GoToWebinar window, as you will be required to log in again if you wish to rejoin the session. If you experience problems with the audio, one possible solution is to use the conference call number and listen to the presentation using your phone. Click the Use Telephone option in the option pane of your control panel to view the conference call number. The webinar is being recorded, and the online archive will be available to view on the CAPA website in approximately 2 weeks. Are there any questions before we get started? Before I hand over the virtual microphone to Jen Larson, I thought I would just give her a little introduction. Jen was a member of the Lambda chapter and has held various CAPA positions through the years, including Provincial Director of Chapters, Chapter Coordinating Director, CAPA Facilitator, and CAPA Trainer. Thank you so much, Jen, for joining us today, and you can get started.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Lisa, by the way, is going to keep me on track tonight, so I'm completely dependent upon all her technology knowledge. And I want to thank all of you for joining me this evening on this webinar on dining etiquette. So I have a lot of great things to share with you tonight. Some of it you may already know, and some will be new information, but I hope that everybody will take home some little tidbit or two of good skills and new etiquette knowledge. So please keep a list of questions as we go along, because Lisa mentioned we'll have different opportunities where we'll take a break and have a little question and answer period. So if you have a question, jot it down, and then we will get to you. So let's get started. I have a little outline of all the different things that we're going to cover tonight. First of all, we're going to start out by taking a little etiquette quiz just to see what you know, and then we'll be able to see at the end what you actually learned. I have some general guidelines for good social etiquette that we'll review, and also some host duties and guest duties, which will relate both to business etiquette as well as social etiquette. Table setting, and I have a little napkin 101 that we'll review, so you'll never have to wonder what to do with your napkin ever again. Some serving, passing, and eating tips, some general do's and don'ts when you're at the dinner table, some guidelines for paying the bill, and some etiquette for special food items that you come across and you're never quite sure just exactly what to do with them. So we're going to review all of those things tonight. So let's start with the etiquette quiz. So the first question that I have here is, if in doubt about what to wear to a business lunch, plan to dress in A, a suit, B, an outfit with a jacket, C, an outfit with a sweater, or D, jeans and a t-shirt. So
Okay.
you can pick your answer. And then Lisa, you can just tell us when the voting on that is done.
We're almost done.
Okay.
Okay, I'll close the poll in a second. There we go.
Okay.
And there's our results. Can you see those?
No, actually I can't.
I will share them with you then. 45% of the respondents said a suit, and 55% said an outfit with a jacket.
Okay, so keep track of what you said, how you voted, and then at the end we'll go over all the correct answers. Okay, so the second question is, during the meal, place a purse or briefcase, A, on the floor beside you, B, over the back of your chair, C, on the table beside your plate, or D, on the table above your plate. Okay, go ahead and pick your answer. Okay.
I'm going to close my poll. Here are the results. 85% of respondents said on the floor beside you, and 15% said over the back of your chair.
Okay, excellent. Now, number 3, elbows on the table are not acceptable. A, while eating, B, before the meal is served, C, between courses, or D, after the meal is finished. So you can go ahead and vote. Okay.
Yep, there we go. Everyone has responded. The results are 95% said while eating, and 5% said before the meal is served.
All righty, excellent. Now to the next question. When do I put my napkin in my lap or on my lap? A, when you first sit down. B, when your neighbor puts his on his lap or her lap. C, when everyone is seated. Or D, when your mouth gets messy. So you can vote on that.
Excellent. Here are the results. 60% said when you first sit down, and 40% said when everyone is seated.
Okay. And the next question is, when excusing yourself from the table momentarily, you place your napkin on the table to the left, or B, you place your napkin on your seat. C, place your napkin over the back of your chair, or D, place your napkin on the table to the right. So you can vote.
Okay, here are the results. This one was very split. 20% of people said place your napkin on the table to the left. 50% said place your napkin on your seat. 10% said place your napkin over the back of your chair. And 20% said place your napkin on the table to the right.
All righty. Oh, that'll be a good one. Okay, now for number 6. Which one is my bread plate? The one on your right or the one on your left? That'll be a quick answer. Okay.
Okay, here we go. The results are 15% say on your right and 85% say on your left.
All right. And 2 more questions. When not in use, place your knife either A, on the side edge of your plate, B, on the table to the right side of your plate, C, across the top of your plate, or D, in your mouth and lick it clean. Now, we will hope that nobody says D, right? Even though I've seen that.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Here we go. Here are the results. 45% people said on the side edge of your plate. 10% said on the table to the right of your plate. 45% said across the top of your plate.
Okay. And for our last question, if you get a tough piece of gristle in your mouth, A, simply spit it into your napkin. B, say yuck and spit it onto your plate. C, demand another piece of meat that hopefully has no gristle. Or D, remove and place it on the edge of your plate. So voting again. Okay.
Here we go. Here are the results. 60% said simply spit it into your napkin, and 40% said remove and place it on the edge of your plate.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. And again, we will answer these and review those answers at the very end of this presentation. So now moving on, I have some general guidelines for just good behavior. Number 1 is shake hands with everyone, men and women, the same way. The one hand, firm but not too bone-crushing, shake hand is the most effective and the most professional. So it doesn't matter, whether you're shaking hands with another woman or another man, everyone should shake hands. So the next one, women should stand when introduced. Just as men do. And it's just so much nicer when you can stand up and introduce yourself and say hello and actually shake hands with that person that you've just been introduced to. The next one is when you're introducing yourself or you're trying to say your name perhaps over the phone or in another situation, always use your full name when introducing yourself. It gives yourself more credibility and it's much more professional sounding. The next one, introduce people in business based on rank, not gender. So if you are introducing Ms. Jones, who happens to be the president of your company, to a gentleman in a lesser position, you introduce the person based on rank, not on gender. The next one is avoid touching people beyond the one-hand professional handshake. Now, this is true when you are in a professional situation and you really don't know the person. There are situations where you've met the person before, but it's just nice to greet them with a handshake, and they may put their hand on your shoulder and say, "Oh, it's so good to meet you." Or if you're a Kappa, of course you're going to hug, because Kappas always do that. So never give that one a second thought. But when you're in a professional situation, the handshake is all that you need to do. Avoid showing too much skin in any business situation. So I have a little trick that I always suggest, and that if you're worried at all about whether you're worried about the top that you've got on or you're worried about the bottom you've got on, if you just bend over and touch your toes and you see that there's any kind of a problem, either top or bottom, go and change your clothes before you head out the door. Too much skin is not professional. People open doors for people, not necessarily men opening doors for women. So if someone opens the door for you, you should not take this as an act of impoliteness. You should just look at them and say, "Thank you very much." And in another situation, you may have the opportunity to open the door for someone else. Always attempt a conversation. And you hear about small talk. Small talk is not an option. It is definitely required. And you need to think about all the different small talk options that you have, the ones that are really good and the ones that you want to avoid. But always attempt a conversation and try to be polite. Avoid saying "hun," "dear," and "dude" in the workplace environment and over the phone. I think we've all heard that. You say, "Oh, hun, not to worry. I'll get back to you another time." It's just not polite in the workforce. So keep that more professional and avoid that kind of thing. Okay. So now we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about host duties. So this would be, and we'll look at some of these ideas either from a business standpoint or from more of a social standpoint. But there are certain things that the host is responsible for doing. One is the host issues the invitation. So if you are a business person and you're inviting a colleague or someone that you're interviewing perhaps out to a lunch or a dinner, you definitely issue the invitation. And you make the reservation at wherever it has been decided upon that you want to go. Be there on time. In case something happens and you get caught in traffic or some completely unforeseen thing occurs, call the restaurant and let them know that you are going to be delayed. But otherwise, be there on time to greet your guests. So you want to make them feel comfortable. You want to introduce them to others that might be joining you, and just make them feel as good as they possibly can. And allow the guest to precede you to the table. So if you have a hostess there at the restaurant that's taking you to the table that's been reserved for you, it's the guest that goes before you. And then they get a chance to sit at the best spot and get the good view, or the prime spot at the table. So that's the polite thing to do as the host. And also the host keeps the conversation going. And just as I mentioned before, small talk is not an option. You want to make sure that you're versed in a lot of little different things, different topics that you can talk about and, have some level of interest going. And the host pays the bill. So if possible, you can prearrange to have the credit card all taken care of, so when you're ready to leave the dinner, you don't have to fiddle around with the bill. It's all been taken care of. So that's not always possible, but it's great if you can do that. So next we have the guest duties. So the guest, first of all, when you've been invited to a dinner, either a business lunch or dinner, or you've been invited to someone's home, you want to check to see what the dress code is and whether you're making the right selection when you get ready to attend this. And the one really important thing that I don't have up here, but I want to confirm with you that this is a critical thing, is to respond promptly to the invitation. And that is not only true when you've received a business invitation, but it's true when you receive an invitation to anything, whether it's to a chapter event, whether it's to an alumni event, or whether it's to meet up with a bunch of friends just to go out and have dinner together. If you're invited, respond immediately. And plan to arrive about 10 minutes early. Too early is a little awkward, but you don't want to be late. So, it makes you feel comfortable. Just arrive a little bit early. And then you wait for the host or hostess to sit down. This is after you've been led to the table if you're in a restaurant or if you're in someone's home. Once the host or hostess is seated, then you may also sit down and everyone will join you. So the host or hostess leads that. If there happens to be a situation where there's a prayer or a blessing that's going to be said and that's something that you're not comfortable with, all you need to do is just sit there quietly, let the blessing go on, and proceed after that. Also, if there's a toast being made, if it's some type of a celebratory event and somebody wants to raise a toast to, acknowledge someone, just always join in with a toast. And if you don't have a glass of wine or a cocktail, you toast with your glass of water. Gifts. If you have been invited to someone's home, it's always nice to take a small host or hostess gift. It just shows appreciation. It doesn't have to be large, but it's a very, very nice thing to do and always well appreciated by the host or hostess. And when you are in a restaurant, do not offer to pay the bill. The host will pay. So just accept that and let that be. Do not offer to pay. Okay. So here is another one that is really, really important. Send a thank you note within 48 hours. A handwritten thank you note is absolutely, positively the most polite thing you can do. If there's an odd situation where you don't have an address to send a handwritten note to, you certainly would have an email. But the main thing is to send a thank you note within 48 hours to let your host or hostess know that you have had a wonderful time. So don't forget that. Really, really important. Now we're just going to take a quick minute here to see if anybody has any questions. And if not, we'll move on.
Hi, Jan. At this time, there have been no questions, so I'll just remind everyone that if you have a question as Jan is speaking, feel free to type it into the question pane, and we'll answer it as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit more about table setting. So there's several ways to set the table, but the two we're going to discuss tonight are the informal and the formal, probably focusing a little bit more on the formal. The difference between them is the informal has minimal tableware and is up to probably 3 courses. And the flatware is placed on the table at the same time, and it's all there, so you won't need anything more. Whereas the formal table setting, it can be a meal of up to 6 courses. Some pieces may be cleared away and others added, such as an extra spoon or an extra fork or an extra plate, something of that nature. But typically, that's not the normal thing that you're going to encounter, but you do want to be prepared and you do want to know about it. So if you are going to, have a formal dinner or an informal place setting, you want to take a close look at your menu and see what you're going to be serving and how many items on your menu you have, and then you'll know how to set your table. Okay, so moving on, we're going to take a look at a formal place setting. So as you can see, it has 3 forks, and it's got a knife and a teaspoon and a soup spoon. This particular table setting shows a soup bowl. Not only always will soup be a course, but in this situation, it appears like somebody's going to be serving soup. So there's the soup bowl, and you can see that the soup spoon is on the far right side. The napkin here is placed off to the left of the forks. So you'd have your salad fork, your dinner fork, and then here there is a dessert fork. And we'll talk about that in just a minute too. Up on the left, this was one of the questions. Up on the left side, you see the bread and butter plate. And in this table setting, the butter spreader is placed across the top of the butter and the bread and butter plate. And I will show you another picture where that option could change just a little bit. The napkin, again here, we see it off to the far left on the the far side of the forks. But napkins, as you might recall, can be placed in a variety of different things. So if it were just the plate that was at your table setting, there was no soup bowl, perhaps the napkin could be folded in a very fancy way and placed on your plate. Or it could be placed in a different location on the table. But typically what you see here is 100% acceptable, and you'd never have any question about it. Now, if you look up at the top here on the right, you'll see the 3 glasses. The water goblet comes first, and it is pretty much directly up and just a little to the left of the knife. The red wine glass comes next, and the white wine glass comes next. Now, if you're just going to put 1 wine glass there, then that's perfectly fine too. And it would be sort of a multi-purpose glass, and depending on what you're serving. So I mentioned to you that we would talk about the dessert fork just a little bit. There's other table settings where you will see a dessert fork and a dessert spoon placed above the plate. Now the dessert fork is placed above, and the handle will point to the left. The spoon will go above it, and the handle of the spoon is aimed towards the right. So you can picture that in your mind. You'd have the fork so that the handle again is heading left, and above it the spoon with the handle heading to the right. And that is just another option for your dessert fork and spoon. Okay, so let me just show you this next picture. And here we have pretty much the same thing. You see the napkin is a little bit different. It's a lot fancier than just the flat folded napkin we saw before. You see that the butter knife has been placed on the table above the butter plate. That's acceptable. And in this situation, there's no soup bowl. But you see the word forks underneath it. And this is a very good way for you to remember how and what order you place all the different things on the table. So the F comes first, and that's for forks, obviously, which will be on your left. Then you have the O, which would indicate the next thing is your dinner plate, which is round. And then, this was interesting, I love this. R, we never knew what the R was for. It just happened to fit in with forks. But the other night I did this presentation, and somebody came up with this great idea, so now I've incorporated it into my presentation, that the R are for the ridges on the knife. Don't you think that's a great idea? So anyhow, we've got R for ridges, and then you look at your knife, and you can see that those ridges are placed towards the plate. They are placed in towards the plate. And then the S, you have your spoons. So that will help you to remember in what order they go. But then here's another little thing. We talked about which side is your bread and butter plate on. So we have the word or the initials BMW, easy to remember. So the bread is on the left, the meal, your dinner plate, is in the middle, and the W would be for your water goblet, which is up on the right. So those are just a couple little handy hints to help you remember when you are setting your table. Okay, so I'll ask again to see if there's any more questions.
Sorry, Jan, I forgot to unmute myself. No, at this point there's no extra questions.
No more questions. Okay, so that's great. Then everybody's got that all figured out. Now we're going to move on and talk about the napkin. So this is my little napkin 101 lesson. And I don't know about you, but I watch people and what they do with their napkins. And sometimes it's just not really good what they do or don't do with their napkins. And then other times I'm like really impressed. People really know how to handle this. But I think this is a really important lesson. So we're going to go through and review all these different things. Now the host, and especially if you're at someone's home or you are in a restaurant where you've been invited to this dinner, the host signals the beginning of the meal by placing the napkin in his or her lap. Now if there is no designated host, then you put your napkin on your lap when you sit down. Okay. Do not unfold the napkin until it is in your lap or on your lap. So if you have a large dinner napkin that's all folded up nicely on your table to the left of your forks, you would take that napkin off of the table, you would take it down to your lap, and then you would unfold it. You wouldn't grab it off the table, shake it all out, and then lay it on your lap. So if it's a large dinner napkin, you leave it folded in half and you place it on your lap. If it's a smaller luncheon napkin, you can unfold it completely and place it on your lap. And the same would apply whether it's a cloth napkin or whether it's a paper napkin. You use the same method. And this will carry through for the whole outline of my Napkin 101. Okay, so the next one. Never tuck your napkin into your shirt, collar, or your belt. Now, if you are out at a restaurant and you decide that you're just starving for spaghetti with red sauce, but you happen to wear your beautiful brand new white blouse and you don't want to take any chance of getting any spaghetti sauce on yourself, and you're going to tuck your napkin in, you have to do two things. Either A, you don't wear that beautiful new blouse out to dinner with the thought of ordering spaghetti, or while you're there, you change your mind and you order something that you're not going to worry about spilling all down the front of you. So you never tuck your napkin into your shirt, collar, or belt. Now, if you're in a restaurant where you've decided to order lobster or something like that and they bring that bib out and tie it around your neck, that's perfectly fine. That is exactly an acceptable thing to do. But on your own, you leave your napkin on your lap. The napkin stays on your lap for the duration of the meal when dabbing one's mouth or excusing yourself from the table. So we'll get back to the word dabbing. But if you get up to excuse yourself and you leave the table with the intention of returning, you place your napkin on your chair. So otherwise, the napkin stays in the lap for the duration. So again, if you get up to leave the table, you place your napkin on the chair. Now sometimes you'll be in a situation where the waiter while you're gone will come to the table, and he will pick up your napkin and he'll fold it and he'll place it back on the table. And if that happens, then that's perfectly fine. That's completely acceptable. But as far as you're concerned, when you leave the table with the thought of returning, you place your napkin on your chair. Okay. Now dabbing. I mentioned we get back to dabbing, and here we are. With your napkin, you dab the corners of your mouth only. So you pick it up and you dab the right side and then you dab the left side, as opposed to taking the napkin and running it all over your face and your mouth, trying to get off every little bit of crumb and anything else that might have landed on your mouth. You just very politely dab the corners of your mouth. Never use your napkin as a handkerchief. Sometimes you're at the table and you think, oh, your nose starts to run a little bit, or you're just, want to scratch your nose, or maybe you want to, you're a little hot and your forehead's perspiring or something, and you want to take your napkin and just sort of dab your forehead. Don't do it. If this is a problem and you don't have a little handkerchief or a little Kleenex in your pocket, then that's when you get up and excuse yourself from the table so that you can go to the ladies' room, blow your nose, and then return. But you never use your napkin as a handkerchief. Okay. And now the napkin is also not used for blotting your lipstick. And in fact, you should not be putting lipstick on while you're at the table anyhow. But the napkin is not used for blotting your lipstick. And you do not refold your napkin when you leave and you're done with the meal. You just leave it very loosely and you place it to the left of your plate. So those are all the little things about napkins. The other one thing I want to mention is if it falls on the floor and you're in a restaurant, you leave it on the floor and you signal to your waiter or waitress to please bring you another napkin, but you don't pick it up. If you're in someone's house, and your napkin falls off your lap, I don't think that's a problem. You can just reach down and pick it up. But when you're in a restaurant, you just leave it there and then you request another napkin. Okay. So if there are any questions on that, now here's a little picture which is not good napkin etiquette. Although they do look like they're having a pretty good time, and it looks like they're toasting with chicken wings. I'm not quite sure, but anyhow, napkin on the head is also not such a great idea either. Okay, so we're moving on, and we're going to talk about silverware and dinnerware. Now there are two different styles of eating with your silverware. One is the American style, which I think most of us are used to, so that you would hold, if you're cutting a piece of meat, with your fork in your left hand, you would hold the meat, you would cut it with your right hand, lay the knife on your plate, transfer the fork to your right hand, and then you would begin eating. Whereas with the continental or the European style, you typically keep the fork in your left hand and you eat with your left hand, and all probably keeping the knife in your hand most of the time while you're eating. So I'm sure you've seen it. If it's not something that you're comfortable doing, either one are completely acceptable. Once used, your utensil, whether it's your fork, your knife, or your spoon, should not touch the table again. It should be laid across the top of your plate, but never put it back down on the table. The signal that you're done, and I think you can probably see that little picture off in the corner, you place your fork and your knife in like at a 4 o'clock angle, and that signals that you're done. And the waiter, if you're in a restaurant, will see that and come and take your plate away. Now the signal that you're not done, you lay your fork and your knife crisscross against each other, like in the sign of an X. And that's almost to say, like, no, don't take my plate away, I'm not done. Whereas you do this if you have to get up and excuse yourself from the table. You can do that. Okay. Unused silverware should be left on the table. Don't move it around. Don't pick it up and put it on your plate. Just leave it on the table. And do not stack your dinnerware when you're done. That just is not done. You just leave it the way it is, and the waiter will take it away. And if you're in someone's home at a dinner, then the host or hostess will get up and take the plates away, or you may offer to help. But don't stack the dinnerware. Just take things away from the person and take them to the kitchen or wherever you're directed to do that. Okay, so moving on, we're going to talk about serving, passing, and eating. So dishes are served from the left and they are removed from the right. Always say please and thank you. I think we all know that. And the butter, spreads or dips, should be transferred to the plate before eating or spreading. So I'll use the butter as an example. If you have asked someone to pass you the butter and the plate comes to you and it has a butter knife on the plate, you take a little pat of butter, you put it on your butter plate, return that knife to the butter plate that was passed to you, and then you pass it along to someone else, or if no one else wants it, you return it to the table. And it's then that you take your own knife and you use the butter to either put on your bread or, wherever else you're going to be using the butter. But you always put it on your plate. You transfer it to your plate before using. You pass the food from the left to the right. So that's always something to remember. And if someone asks for the salt, you either pass them both together or you ask that person, do you want the pepper too? But typically it's just smarter to take both the salt and pepper and pass them both at the same time. So you would pass all the food from the left to the right. Okay, so here's some more tips. Do not talk with food in your mouth. I think we've all heard that since we probably were able to understand English. Taste the food before seasoning. This is especially important if you are in someone's home because they believe that they have prepared this meal to be just perfect. And if you're served the food and the first thing you do is just salt and pepper it to pieces, they're going to be offended. And you might find that you didn't need to salt and pepper. So always taste your food before putting salt and pepper or some other form of seasoning on that. The next one, do not blow on your food to cool it. If you put it to your lip and you can tell right away it's just too hot to eat, put it back in the bowl or put it back down on your plate and wait for it to cool itself before you begin to eat it. Cut only enough food for the next mouthful. You don't want to get to your plate and start and cut up all your food into all these little pieces and just have this big confusing look on your plate. You want to only cut enough food for your next mouthful. Maybe 2 pieces, maybe 3, but no more than that. And then eat a little bit of everything on your plate. Of course, if you have an allergy or it is just something that you don't eat, you just absolutely don't eat, then you can just pass it by. But try to eat a little bit of everything on your plate, especially when you're in someone's home. They've prepared everything for you, and they're pretty certain that you're going to be really pleased with everything that they've fixed for you. Okay. Pace your eating. Instead of sitting there and gobbling everything down and then being the first person finished and then sitting while everybody else is still busy eating, watch around and see how everybody's doing. On the other hand, don't eat so slowly that everybody else is done or they're trying to keep up with your pace, and it is just driving them crazy because you eat so slow. So pace your eating, pay attention to what other people are doing, and look around you. And again, do not play with your food or your utensils. This is pretty obvious, but I just wanted to pass that along to you. A few other things that I don't have on the PowerPoint, but I'm going to mention to you because I think they're really important. Fingers are never used as food pushers. You use your knife when eating in the continental style, but in the American style, a piece of bread is held in the other hand to push onto your fork or into your spoon. Now, if you don't have any bread, or you don't like bread, you don't eat bread, whatever, then you may use your knife as the pusher with either style of eating. Do not put liquid into your mouth if it's already filled with food. You swallow first and then you take a sip. And do not announce all your food allergies. If or your likes or dislikes. You don't say, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're having this. I don't like this. Oh, I'm allergic to that. I can't eat that. You just don't say it. If it's something that you simply don't eat, then don't eat it. If your hostess usually will ask if you have any allergies or if there's any special dietary restrictions that you have. If she doesn't, and those restrictions are pretty serious, if you're a vegetarian, if you're gluten-free, if you have allergies, then it's very polite for you to contact your host or hostess and let them know that these are things that you just cannot eat. And they will appreciate, the host or hostess will appreciate your doing that so that there's no embarrassment on either side when you're there for the dinner. So if anything lands on the floor, I mentioned the napkin, if your food lands on the floor, utensil, leave it there. Do not put it back on the table. I did comment that, if you're in someone's home and your napkin falls off your lap onto the floor, it's perfectly fine to pick it up and put it back on your lap, but never in a restaurant. And certainly the utensil, you don't want to use that. You just ask for a new one or you try to do without it. The woman should leave their purses on their laps or put them on the floor. Never place your purse or your briefcase on the table. So if you have one of those small little clutch bags or something like that, you can put it on your lap and then you would place your napkin over it. So that would make it really simple and easy for you. So a couple of other things just to kind of keep you right up to date on some of the little things, and I'm kind of glancing at a couple of things that I've written down here. Obviously, you chew with your mouth closed and you take small bites so that you don't hold up the conversation by taking too long to chew and swallow. And I think we've all experienced, you're out in a social situation and you're trying to eat and you're trying to talk all at the same time. So if you take those small bites, it'll make it much, much better. And then don't monitor another person's food consumption. If you look over and you say, oh, wow, you certainly are hungry tonight because that person's piled a lot of food on their plate, or maybe they've just put little dabs on it and you don't want to say, well, I guess you don't like that very much. You just leave it alone and you don't bother with it. So those are just some of the things. There's a whole bunch more, but I think you get the gist of that. And the other thing I want to mention is applying lipstick at the table is never acceptable. If you need to put fresh lipstick on, you excuse yourself from the table, you go, put it on, and then you return. And remember not to blot your lipstick on your napkin. Okay. So let's look at a few more things here. We want to remember to keep our elbows off the table. Do your best to talk with everyone. Dealing with difficult situations. So if you spill your water, you just try not to make a big deal of it. You take your napkin and blot it up as best you can, and then either the waiter or in someone's home, they'll bring you another napkin or something to help you out. If the accident occurs, you just say, excuse me, and if there's a reason you've spilled all down yourself or you've spilled something on yourself that you need to get rid of, you just excuse yourself and again, go and take care of it. If there's a serious situation such as choking or somebody falls or something of that nature, you help in any way you can. Etiquette is not the main concern at a time like that, so you don't worry about it. If you encounter a foreign object in your food, so you find a little hair or a little bug or something like that, and I think we've all had that experience, you don't make a big deal out of it. You just ask either the waiter to come and take it away, or if you're in someone's home, you just sort of leave it and you just move it into your napkin, put it in your hand, and you don't put it in your napkin, but you put it in your hand and you place it back on your plate. So what do you do if you get food stuck in your teeth? Now this drives me crazy, and it's something that we all deal with. You just, you take a drink of water and you try to, without slushing it around, you try to remove it. But if you can't, you certainly aren't going to sit there and pick at it with your finger or with your fork or with a toothpick. If it's really driving you crazy, again, you excuse yourself, go to the ladies' room, remove it, and then return. But if you look at your neighbor and you see that your neighbor's got food on their mouth or they've got a big piece of salad stuck in their tooth, then it's very polite to let them know that they have something in their tooth or on their face. And you can do that very easily by just pointing. Very subtly, you kind of point to your tooth, and it will be an indicator to them that they've got something that they may want to get rid of. So here's one other little thing that I think is really important too, is if you eat or drink something that is just way too hot, you didn't test it first, you just pop it into your mouth, then you just try to cool it down by drinking your water. If your water's gone, it's perfectly acceptable to take your neighbor's water and drink it, because you've got something really in your mouth that could be a problem for you. So those are just a couple of things for difficult situations. Cleaning up the spills, again, if you spill something on your neighbor, it's not up to you to blot them clean with your napkin. Loud eating and coughing, not so good. And here's the big one. Turn off your cell phone. Keep it off the table. I'm going to let that, I got a little carried away with my animation. Okay. Paying the bill. Unless you are a guest, tell the waiter when the check should be shared, because they will want to know when it will be separate or you're going to share it somehow. Consider the significant price differences. So if you're out with some friends and you have a piece of bread and a glass of water, and your other friend has the 3 courses, a glass of wine and coffee, then obviously there's going to be a little price difference. So you can make arrangements and talk about that before you go out to dinner. Always leave a tip. It can vary 15 to 25%. If the waiter's been really extraordinary, 25% is definitely not a bad thing. Coat check $1 per coat, and the car attendant $2 to $5. I guess it depends on how fabulous your car is. Okay, so now we're going to go over this briefly because we do want to take time just to review the quiz, and we're going to run out of time. But there are certain ways to eat a lot of different foods, and I'm going to go over these really quickly. I'm not going to talk about each one of them, but I do want to talk about the bread, because the bread for me is a very important thing. You take the bread, you have it on your bread plate, and then instead of cutting the bread all in one great big piece and then buttering the whole thing, you break the bread by your hand, not cutting it with your knife, into 1 or 2 bite-sized pieces. You butter that piece only, then you eat it. When you're ready for the next piece of bread, you butter that, and then you eat that. Corn on the cob, usually only served at an informal meal, but you only butter a couple of rows of the corn at a time, and you eat that. Put it down, and then you can rebutter the rest of it as you go along. French fries, typically you'll eat that by hand, and that's not impolite to do. Spaghetti, a lot of people ask for the spoon, and they'll roll up and twirl the spaghetti in a spoon. But the preferred method for doing that is to actually just take a few strands of the spaghetti and twirl it on your plate and eat it. And here's an interesting one that I like, and it's not on here, but tea bags. Usually tea bags are only found in the teapots, but if you have a cup with a tea bag in it. You remove the tea bag, you let it drain just a little bit, and then you move it to your saucer or to a plate. You don't squeeze out all the little extra juice that's in that tea bag. That's just totally not polite. So anyhow, those are just a couple of things for specific eating of different types of food. And I kind of hurried through that because we have some other things that we want to cover. Here's just some pictures of some bad etiquette. The reaching, here's the guy with his napkin and his collar, and his fork and his knife are upright. Here's a couple over in the corner having a really fun conversation with their cell phones, right? And then the thing that I like up above is the table manners thing. And if you look down the side, it says, say please. And if you read it across, it gives you all the tips. Sit up, please. Always put your napkin on your lap. You may eat when everyone is served. And it just goes right on down. So if anybody wants to have that, I would be glad to send that along to you because I think that's a pretty cool thing. Here we're going to answer our questions from the quiz and see how you did. The first question, which was about what to wear to a business lunch, and as I recall, 45% said a suit and 55% said an outfit with a jacket. So at a business lunch, the outfit with a jacket is the correct answer. So good for that 55%. But the suit would not be an outrageous thing. The jeans and t-shirt, not so good. Number 2, during the meal, place a purse or briefcase on the floor beside you. I think we learned that, and most everybody got that right. Number 3, elbows on the table are not acceptable while eating. If you're between courses, before the meal is served, after it's finished, it's okay to rest your arms or perhaps your elbows on the table, not while you're eating. When do I put my napkin in my lap? When you first sit down. Unless your host will sit down first and then indicate the beginning of the meal by placing his or her napkin on his lap first. Okay. Number 5, when excusing yourself from the table momentarily, you place your napkin on your seat. There was a mixed variety of answers there, but the majority said place your napkin on your seat, and that is correct. Number 6, which one is my bread plate? Well, we now know because B, MW, B is on your left. So that is your bread plate. Number 7, when not in use, place your knife across the top of your plate. Not on the edge of your plate, not back down on the table, and obviously you're never going to lick the knife clean. And the final one, if you get a tough piece of gristle in your mouth, you remove it and place it on the edge of your plate. You never spit it in your napkin. Okay, so that is the answer to the quiz. And here is another little thing I found about good table manners. And it shows a variety of different little animals. It's kind of funny, and they're doing all the proper right things. You know, reaching, be grateful, napkin in the lap, clean hands, and so on. So now, do we have any more questions? Well, we haven't had any, so I guess, do we have any questions?
Hi, Jan. Thank you so much. There have been a couple questions, but you've actually answered them all throughout your presentation, so there are no additional questions at this time.
Oh, good. Oh, good. All right. Well, if that is all and there are no questions, then that is my presentation. And I hope in going through all of these different things that everybody's picked up, as I say, some little tidbit of new information. And if anybody has any questions, absolutely you can feel free to get a hold of me and ask them of me. I'd be happy to answer them for you. But I hope you take this information back. If you live in a sorority house, it would be fun to practice these new table manners at your dinner some night, and also just to continue to be aware of these good manners and use them all the time, regardless of where you are. So thank you again for attending. This was great.
Thank you to our presenter, Jan, for leading the session, and thank you all for your participation today. If you have any questions or comments about today's topic, you may email the presenter directly at janlarson2001@yahoo.com. I've copied that into the chat window for everyone. If you'd like to be more involved in CAPA's virtual training and webinar programs, we would love to have you join our producer team. Please contact Karen Holmes at KKG headquarters for details. The benefits are excellent: the opportunity to support CAPA's webinar program and a front row seat at a great presentation. As we close the webinar, a survey will open on your screen. You will be prompted to respond to a few evaluation questions. Please take a moment to share your thoughts on today's webinar. Your feedback will help us shape future webinar training events. If you have any additional questions or comments whatsoever, please send an email to kholmes@kkg.org. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for attending.